Hey, it's Arvid, and this is the Bootstrapped Founder. Now here's the thing, I'm about to share all the reasons why you should never ever start a software business. And yes, I'm fully aware that I'm talking to an audience of software founders mostly, but it's somewhat sarcastic. It's kind of an ironic twist on all these great things about entrepreneurship. Here's what I've realized. Talking about the problematic sides of entrepreneurship might actually help somebody who already has this mindset to say, yeah, I'm going to do it anyway. Or somebody who's on the fence to reconsider maybe taking it slow and starting it as a side project instead of jumping in full time. And if you're a founder who's already on that journey, well, I'm just going to share the little things that I've realized along the way so that maybe you can recognize them at an earlier stage and prevent some of the damage. A quick word from our sponsor here, Paddle.com. If you do, for some reason, choose to actually start a software business, I highly recommend looking into Paddle.com. I use them as my merchant of record for all my software projects. They take care of taxes, currencies, they track the client transactions, they update credit cards, reactivate accounts when they're kind of not paying and stuff. It's really helpful. And that means that I can focus on dealing with my market, my competitors, and not with banks and financial regulators. Don't have to deal with that. So if you would rather just build your product, check out Paddle.com as your payment provider. So let me now get into the mindset here. Why should you never, ever start a software business as a solopreneur or as a bootstrap founder? Well, first off, it can get incredibly lonely. Software entrepreneurship means that you're going to spend most of your time with your code, with your product, and with making sure that it runs and making sure it provides the value that people may or may not pay money for. You're constantly going to be interfacing with computer systems all the time. And when you then rarely interface with your customers, it tends to be in a negative context. Sure, you can have a nice conversation. I try to have this all the time with my own customers. You can turn a bug report into a really friendly interaction with a prospect or with a customer. A complaint or a help request, you can always kind of turn that into something positive if you put the energy in. But it starts out as a point of friction, as a point of a challenge. So any human interaction that you're likely going to have with your customers is going to be one of being challenged, of somebody seeking help, or, and this might be even worse when you come from a technical perspective, somebody who's not interested in your product. You try sales outreach, you try marketing, people come in, they see it, and then they don't want it. They don't even want to come in. You send emails, people say, stop sending me emails. And that can make you feel fairly lonely, particularly if you're not doing this with a group of people. The way out for me has been being very active in my founder community, Twitter and Slack groups, and reading people's blog posts, writing my own blog posts and interacting with my readers, having this podcast, having interviews on this podcast, talking to people, just giving my brain the feeling that it's all real and that I'm not alone. But there are different kinds of lonely. There's the lonely that happens over time, where you just feel like another week went by and I only had like 2 real conversations with people during my work hours. This is kind of a sad, prolonged lonely, right? But then there's also the lonely in the moment. And that may sting even more. It's like 2:00 in the morning. For some reason, your server has decided to run out of memory and you're trying to restart it to make sure that the product comes back up. But then it fills up again, memory, within like 5 minutes. And you need to restart it again. So you need to fix the problem while you're also triaging the problem. And then customers start emailing you because they live on the other side of the world and they really want to use your product and stuff just doesn't work. And there's a loneliness in that moment where you're the sole defender of the castle and you have to keep the invading hordes at bay, but also tell your castle inhabitants that things are going to be okay while sharpening your swords and patching up your armor at the same time and fighting. It's a lot. And it's a lot of pressure in moments where you don't have many people around you to help you. This is another problem with being a software founder. It is quite unlikely that your immediate family or even your friends can help you with these issues. People have all kinds of jobs. But your issues, the problems you have, and the solutions you have to create are so specific that the help you can find is expensive and not reliably present. So that's a problem. Right? Here's another reason why you should never start a software as a service business, particularly in the early stages where you're the only person responsible for the business, you are responsible for everything. And things will pull at you with previously unknown priorities. You just don't know what's going to be important. At some point, you thought you had it all figured out. You've developed your outreach campaign that brings in new leads and they eventually convert with like 20% or whatever. And then all of a sudden, one of the service providers that you use for your emails starts experiencing outages like every other day. And it gets worse and worse. And you suddenly have to completely rebuild your email infrastructure because the service needs to be replaced. So not only do you need to replace a running system and run an outreach process that is mapped onto your email automations, you also need to find a comparable provider that's equally as capable, and you need to find them somewhere else. And then you have to integrate it into your system and rebuild the exact same system. And that came out of the blue. It took you 3 days. It ate up most of your week. And all of a sudden, everything else you wanted to do, that feature that you promised your customers, none of that got done. Lightning is going to strike all the time. And in a way, avoiding it makes it worse. So you have to become a lightning rod for problems. You have to go towards the problems anytime they might appear. That's really hard to think about if you come from a different background. As somebody who previously was a salaried engineer, when I started software development, I was taught to avoid problems, to avoid bugs, to avoid complications, to avoid challenges, make sure they can never, ever happen, never appear. And then when I became an entrepreneur, it was like, no. I have to get to the challenge before the challenge gets to me. I have to make sure that I preempt the chaotic explosion and make it happen early so that I can see what parts of it get burned so I can build a stronger fireproof system around those systems. I have to actively trigger things to go wrong to see how they go wrong and how I can prevent the cascade. You know that meme of the airplane with the bullet holes? It's commonly used to say that people focus on the wrong things when they try to improve something. It's like US engineers thought that only the areas of planes that returned from fighting that had a lot of bullet holes should be strengthened, and forgetting that the areas that didn't receive many bullet holes in the planes coming back were likely representative of the fact that if a plane was shot while in the air in those areas, it wouldn't even make it back home. And that is a long way of saying selection bias. It's kind of what it is. You want the plane to explode quickly. I'm sorry for the analogy here, but you do want to see where things break so you can see where you need to strengthen the system more. If things keep working, but not as well as they could be, they will blow up in your face eventually. Any sufficiently complicated system will eventually have some kind of internal or external explosion, either through latency accumulating in your system, things just getting slower and then weird things happen, or external dependencies dropping, connections dropping, or some kind of dependency not working the way it should be. There will be something at some point and you will need to be there. Which brings me to my third point. You are effectively working 24/7 if you run a solopreneur business. Not surprising, but that is what is expected, or what you will probably come to expect of you because of the reality here. You're not going to pull all your efforts in 24/7. You're still going to go to sleep, and most nights it's going to be great. You wake up, you go to work, you keep working on it, you take care of all the customer service messages that come in overnight, you send out emails the next morning. There'll be some kind of structure to your day. But then there will be days where this just doesn't matter. When at 3 a.m. you get a notification, if you've set it up, hopefully you have, an SMS push notification to your phone, which you probably need to configure to ignore most things because you get a lot of notifications during the day, but the critical ones you have to let through. And that message will tell you your website isn't reachable. Your external monitoring, the pingdoms, uptime robots, what have you, they've tried to ping your website and it's not responding. And you have customers that have an SLA, like a service level agreement, with a clause that says that the maximum daily downtime is like an hour or 30 minutes. So you just have started your countdown. You better get going. And this is the moment where you work 24/7 because you're always on call. You're always on call building a software business in the early stages, obviously. Even if you've used the best hosting application services, if you've used the best hosted databases, there's going to be something. Something will happen. And even if it's just a connective tissue between those services that sometimes breaks, and you just need to restart your server, it's enough at 3 a.m. to pull you out of your routine. And it's something that's unavoidable until you hire. And even then, you still need to hire somebody who's going to be reliably there and knows exactly what to do, which is a different challenge. Also something they don't teach you, right? How to hire right. But because likely what's going to happen when you hire somebody to fix this for you is that they're going to be woken by the alerts. They'll spend 5 minutes trying to figure out what's going on. And then they're going to try and implement the fix. It won't work. And they wake you up 10 minutes later. In the beginning, that's quite likely the kind of event chain that's going to happen to you. So even if you hire, expect this, unless you hire somebody who is better at this than you are, which you should. But understanding a system like this and all the intricate nuances of it, that's going to take a while for most people. So running a software business is not going to make this easy for people with kids or other dependents that they need to take care of, or who want to have a solid distance from the work that they do. Obviously, there are still a lot of parents, a lot of caretakers, and people with professional distance who end up building successful software businesses, but it's certainly a higher investment in focus and attention. So here's why you really shouldn't build a software as a service business. It is a completely different thing, but it's incredibly hard to convince people to change what they currently have. Most software as a service solutions are new versions or better versions of things that already kind of exist. And the inertia that people have that prevents them from changing from their existing solution to a new solution, that is incredibly hard to overcome. Honestly, I would rather have a server imploding and me fixing that than trying to convince somebody to buy my thing when they already have something. People will go out of their way to not change anything about their work. And this might be different in certain audiences, but I can tell you, it takes a lot of effort to convince somebody not to just give you money. That's already hard, but to change their process in a non-trivial way. This is particularly challenging because in the beginning, as you start your business, you have so many assumptions, right? Otherwise, you just would never get anything done. You have to assume a lot of things. And those assumptions, some of them are likely not correct. So you have to course correct all the time. And a product that is in this path of the first couple of years of course correcting, just trying to figure out what exactly it needs to do, that is so much harder to sell, both as a solution and as an actual thing that costs something. For you to learn how to talk to people in a way that you can actually assuage their fears and actually convince them that they're missing out on something if they don't use this, speaking the language, learning how they prioritize, how they focus on their challenges, that takes a long, long time in any field. And it takes a lot of communication with customers, which, as I mentioned earlier, sometimes is not happening that much because you're so bogged down with the actual product that you want to be able to sell to people. So yeah, this requires a lot of confidence. Do not build a software business if you want to feel secure in your choices and assumptions. Because not only does your product change to meet the job to be done of your customers, but the jobs that your customers have, the internal processes, the internal requirements, they change constantly as well. And this is true for smaller businesses just as much as it is for enterprise businesses. Things are changing all the time. Some companies even have a change management process because of this. You will always have to keep up with things. You will always have to make sure that if somebody changes their process, you can still adequately map your process towards theirs. And then you have to think about the fact that the whole industry is changing. New people join the industry. Some people drop off. New regulation hits the industry. New technologies get developed. New standards defined. Provisions are formulated. And laws are enacted for or against certain things. These new perspectives are now being integrated into people's processes. New taboos come up, old taboos break off. The market is constantly moving. So it is a constant struggle to find out and figure out what is going on and how you have to respond to these things. So if you would like to feel like you know what you're doing, choose an occupation that you can do for 5 years straight and not expect much change. I don't know, become an oil painter, like an artist, because oil paints, I think they've been chemically similar for the last couple of 100 years. Of course, there are new developments in that technology as well, but the act of painting, the act of making art, that does not constantly shift as much as the requirements and minuscule details and processes of people who use software tools. Now, I might be completely off here and there's a super hyperactive oil painting change management situation, but you know what I mean, right? There are jobs that are a little bit less likely to change all the time. Software business or facilitating things through a software business is highly volatile. And then there's the technology layer beneath all of this, right? Everything is getting deprecated and changed all of the time as well. If you choose the current version of Ubuntu Linux to install on a server, well, 2.5 years from now, the long-term support for this is going to end. It's just happening all the time. If you choose MySQL 8 point something today, next year AWS will retire this version, or you still can run it, but they were going to charge you double if you want to keep it running on their platform. And if you use an API, something's going to change, or you're going to be asked to migrate to a new version because only that supports whatever new regulation, SOC 2 or some banking regulation in India or something like that. Stuff like this. Like, none of these are made up terms. Like, this all happened to me at some point in my own journey. It is bizarre how often you have to chase changes and implement them so you can still do the exact same thing you've done before. Things get deprecated and things have to be maintained because it's all turtles all the way down. You choose an infrastructure as a service provider, and that has to maintain a certain set of software, and then they have to upgrade it because of security concerns. Now you have to upgrade your integration, and the people using your product now have to upgrade because something works slightly differently in your product. It's this infinite chain of tiny changes bubbling up and down and making people change the things that they're already running. Ideally, you start containerizing and isolating things, and you make sure that they're compatible and you have alternative ways of doing stuff. But in the end, you'll find that it's always going to stop you left, right, and center because somebody changed the dependency somewhere for good reason, right? It just will happen. And you have to own it. You have to both deal with it in the moment. And if it makes your software more unstable, if it makes your business wobble, you have to tell your customers, we're experiencing a problem. And if you remember a couple of weeks ago, AWS outage in US East 1, everything kind of ground to a halt at some point. You're not supposed to say, hey, it's AWS's fault. I think Robin Hood did that and got some flack publicly on Twitter. Or our email provider isn't working, stuff like that. You have to say, we have a problem with our email. It'll be back in a minute. You have to own those things that are not your fault. And it's one big thing about running a software as a service business. Like, ownership, the projected ownership or real ownership, is limited in many ways. You have to own your issues as well as the things you do well towards your customers. But if we think about the actual ownership of a software business, it's already hard to own a software business, really, because you're just building rented infrastructure on rented land. But you have to think of the fact that there are many variables, so many externalities to running a software business or software as a service business, that it will never be something that you could just freeze and say, this is it forever, right? Things change all the time, and you have to deal with that. I think these are sufficient reasons to consider maybe becoming a farmer or an oil painter. But I know it's complicated. Either of these jobs are hard. I'm quite aware of this. But realistically, none of these are problematic enough to not be worth it, right? Because one of the things that building a software business allows you to do is build a super high leveraged, high revenue company that is very, very interesting for PE companies, for other companies like incumbents to acquire. And that might net you a couple million at the very least if you run it well and bring a customer base that is worth an acquisition. And building software businesses, that's just an interesting way and a fun way to build financial stability and financial security. Unlike so many other things, it has such a massive upside that these downsides, as impactful as they might be, you'll find versions of this in many other occupations that do not guarantee or even promise an exit or an acquisition down the line as building a SaaS would. So it's absolutely worth it for me, even though I sometimes feel lonely when I just try to fix my code, or I wake up to some kind of monitoring email and I think, oh, come on, this again? That's just part of the arena that we're all in. And you can build systems to automate this away, mostly, to make it easier, make it better. And I don't just mean like build technical systems, right? You can build a process too. Build connections with other people who might help you. You can build internal processes for yourself and the company you're building to make these things less likely and less impactful. So if you're still here, if you still want to build a software as a service business, please go for it. The only thing I would recommend is to do it slowly. do it on the side. Build a software business 1 hour a day for a couple weeks. See if you can handle this. See if it fits into your existing lifestyle. And then slowly up it to the point where you're spending most of your time on it. Get into it easy. I think that's the best way of seeing if this is for you. Don't throw yourself into it, like quit your job and just do this for the next year on the little bit of money that you saved. That's just going to freak you out. You have to learn how to deal with these things over time, because here's the truth. Every challenge I've described, every late night server crash, every customer rejection, every deprecated dependency, and there are so many, they're not bugs in the system. They're features. They're what make you resilient. They are what makes your business defensible. They're what separates the people who build lasting companies from those who give up when things get hard the very first time. Loneliness teaches you self-reliance, drives you to build meaningful connections outside of it, hopefully. The constant fires teach you how to build robust systems. Not just the tech, also the operational side. And the 24/7 responsibility teaches you what truly matters. Resistance to change gets you to be more empathetic and start communicating better. And the shifting sands of tech teach you adaptability. Just keeps you sharp. And owning problems that aren't your fault, well, now that is actual leadership. So yes, never start a software business until you're ready to become the person who can handle all of this and still wake up excited about what you're building. Because if you are, there's nothing quite like it. And that's it for today. Thank you for listening to The Bootstrapped Founder. You can find me on Twitter at Arvidkahl, ARVIDKAHL. And if you are missing critical conversations about your brand, if you're a PR expert, a marketing team, or have to do with those people, check out podscan.fm. We monitor 4 million podcasts in real time and alert you when anybody mentions you or the brand that you're interested in. So you can turn this unstructured podcast chatter and those thousands of conversations every day into competitive intelligence. Now, if you're looking for your next venture, if you're trying to find validated problems straight from the market, well, go to ideas.podscan.fm, which is built on top of Podscan, where we identify startup opportunities from hundreds of hours of those expert conversations daily. So you can build what people are already asking for. Thanks so much for listening. Have a wonderful day.